If you would push the record button so that we grab it all. You got it. All right, good. Okay, so calendar announcements. First off, we have a board meeting for the class board that's going to be the evening of October 8th. And the reason I bring that up is if anybody who is not on the board has a question, a concern, or whatever, if you would direct that to Gail, you can PM her on Facebook. If not, I'm sure you all have her email number tattooed on your arm somewhere from the last reunion. If not, get a hold of me. You know how to find me. Okay, upcoming Zoomtails. Tonight, we have a wonderful speaker, but I'm not talking about our wonderful speaker. I'm talking about Thursday, October 23rd. We're going to be partnering with our sister class, the class of 1976. And they have coordinated with Libby Tucker, class of 70, to do a program that I don't know about the rest of you, but I can't wait for it. It is going to be the Ghosts of Mount Holyoke. So Libby is an English professor at Binghamton University, and I have no idea why she knows about the ghosts of Mount Holyoke, and I can't wait to find out. November 6th, we are going to have a program. I'm sorry, I didn't write down what day of the week that is. Somebody will tell me in a minute, I'm sure.
Irene will.
Yes, I know. Irene's awesome. We have Haley Pritzky. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And she is right now, she is a fellow, judicial fellow with the California Capital Fellows program. And she's going to be speaking on the founding of the Mount Holyoke College Law Review. I'm not even sure that a lot of us knew there was a law review, but we have one, and she's going to be speaking about that and the founding of it. And then in December, on a date to be determined, we're going to have the recreation of the Thelma and Louise ride across the U.S. Mine's, of course, the cliff jump at the end. So that will be Robin Isley and Jennifer G'day. I never know if I pronounce your name right, so correct me if I'm wrong. At any rate, some of us have been watching their journey through Facebook, and now you'll get to see it in person. So come to that. And then in January, also on a date to be determined, Nancy Carpenter is going to coordinate an evening on poetry. And I am pledged to silence. So at this point, that's all I'm going to say about that evening, except that it's going to be fun, informative, and Nancy's always wonderful. So whatever it is, it'll be great. Then in February, we will be bouncing back to a speaker probably from the college. So you'll have that to look forward to. Okay, so that is our Zoomtails. The only other thing I would like to bring up to everyone is that, believe it or not, the notes, my notes for the class notes, the deadline is coming up towards the end of October. So I would like to ask everybody to think about what you've been doing recently and get that information to me. You may think it's not exciting, but your class does. And that one person that you haven't spoken to in the last 20 years who hears that you're doing this and they're doing the exact same thing, it will be a new friendship or a renewed friendship. So do send me those. And the wonderful thing about the quarterly these days is that the online quarterly includes photos. So you can send me your news and you can send me your photos. And unless I overload their system, they have not put any limit on me for the number of photos that I post. So send them on. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to introduce Gail, who needs no introduction, because I always introduce Gail, who needs no introduction, and she'll introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Nan. It's great to see everybody again after that summer break. Kassandra Jolley is Mount Holyoke's Vice President for College Relations, which includes responsibility for the fundraising and marketing communication areas at the college. Prior to that, she held the position of Vice President of Advancement. She is a key player in the development and implementation of the MHC Forward Strategic Plan. She completed her undergraduate study at the all-girls Lincoln School in Providence, Rhode Island, and graduated with a degree in communications and women's studies from Simmons College in Boston. She has been around the block a few times, not just because I read that she jogs with a weighted vest now, but because she has served in a number of high-ranking development positions at her alma mater, Simmons College, Roger Williams University, and Berklee College of Music. When she was VP for institutional advancement at Spelman College, she doubled fundraising for the college's most successful fundraising campaign. Kassandra, she is open and accessible. And I know that because when I was at Reunion, we were at one of the cocktail parties, and Trisha Tannen was wrapping up some of her remarks, and I gave Kassandra the high sign, and right out loud she said, "Oh my God, Gail, I'm so sorry, I forgot to make that other announcement." It was funny. It was just very personable for her to remark that way. And she answers emails promptly, and she is a good listener. She's also outspoken, and I'm going to quote her here. "Women are under attack. Our rights, voices, and hard-fought gains are being rolled back. This isn't an overstatement. It's a reality that demands the attention and action of women's college graduates." She is also a charismatic speaker and an excellent writer, and I'll put into the chat in a little bit a link to an article that she wrote about the challenge for women's colleges. She regularly posts on the college media platforms as well as her personal Instagram. And we were most interested in having her speak when we read her words, quote, "Higher education has a PR problem." So welcome, Kassandra.
Well, thank you so much, Gail. What an amazing introduction. And I am just so pleased to be here. And now you've just put me on speaker view, so I can't see all of you. So I just want to note that I can see Nan and Gail and Jane. So if anything goes awry, you need to give me a high sign or somehow otherwise let me know. And as I looked on the Zoom screen, I noticed some old friends but lots of people that I haven't met yet. So I want to just say maybe add a few more words of introduction to your wonderful moment there, Gail. And I'm going to talk for maybe about 15 or 20 minutes. And then we can, I hope, have a really robust Q&A session. You might have questions and hopefully I have answers. So again, I'm Kassandra Jolley. I do have the privilege of serving Mount Holyoke as Vice President for College Relations. One slight correction to my bio, and Gail, you're making me think that it hasn't been updated on the website yet. I am not responsible for marketing and communications any longer. And if I say that with a tad bit of excitement, please don't blame me. It has been an incredibly challenging time for higher education and so forth. And I'll just say a little bit. When 5 years ago, Sonia Stevens, there was a change in leadership at the vice president level for marketing communications. And she knew I had a background and I had done similar work at Spelman. And she asked if I would step in an interim basis. This was in late December, January of 2019. And so I thought, sure, I can do anything for a few months. What happened in March 2020? The pandemic. And by October 2020, Sonia Stevens, then president, said to me, "I can't do a search. Can you take this on for the foreseeable future?" And of course I said yes, because I felt that there was work that I could do. In December of 2024, I went to our now president, Danielle Holly, and I said to her very candidly and openly, "I think I've done all that I can with the skill set that I bring to the table, and Mount Holyoke needs and deserves a dedicated vice president who's thinking about marketing communications all the time," which I was, but also my skills and my talent and my passion is in fundraising. And so I was very pleased that Danielle, after some thought, came back and said, I think you're right. Let's make this happen. So now my portfolio really is focused on fundraising, but also community and government affairs. And that is an area of interest and capacity for me. I'm also, I live in South Hadley, a South Hadley resident. And I think that that's really important for us as we think about our local community. But also, nothing has been more challenging, or I'd say exciting, but challenging is probably the right word, on the government and national front. And if you have specific questions about that, I'm happy to answer. So, but before I say anything else, thank you. This group and this class, I heard about you before I even stepped foot on campus. You are amazing. You've poured decades, really decades, into Mount Holyoke. And when I look at the class, I don't see alums. Actually, I see a living and breathing community, and I see the Mount Holyoke community in you. So, Gail said a little bit about me. Let me add a little texture around that. This is my 34th year as a employee on a college campus. It's my 18th year as a vice president at a women's college, and it's the beginning of my 10th academic year at Mount Holyoke. So my personal story is that I am a first generation graduate of college. Since I graduated from Simmons, my mother graduated from college. She now has 2 master's degrees. Both of my siblings have graduated from college, and all of the grandchildren to date are on a college path. That's really transformational. It was something that was really important to me and my family. I needed a work study job. So when I walked onto the campus at Simmons College, I took a right, and there was the development office. If I had taken a left, we'd be talking about enrollment management right now. And sometimes things are just serendipitous that way. And fundraising was the best profession that I didn't know existed. I thought I would be a teacher. That's what I thought I would be. And in some ways, maybe I am a philanthropic advisor and teacher. When I'm not vice presidenting for Mount Holyoke, which I'm doing all the time, yes, I am running a bit, but mostly walking in my weighted vest. And health and exercise are quite important to me. But what's most important to me is the work that my former spouse and I do to co-parent our 2 daughters. Incredible daughters. Olivia is 19. I'm sorry, Olivia would kill me for that. Olivia is 21. And Olivia attends Holyoke Community College, and Clara is 19 and a sophomore at Roger Williams University in Rhode Island. And they are my heart living outside of my body, and my most treasured accomplishment. And they are still a work in progress, as I tell them most days. So I have had the honor of attending 2 women's institutions. I graduated from the Lincoln School in Providence, Rhode Island, a Quaker school for girls, and I'm involved there as a volunteer. And of course, you've heard my time at Simmons. I have served in professional leadership roles at 3 of the top women's colleges in this country, so Simmons, Spelman, and now Mount Holyoke. And so for me, this isn't a profession, it's a vocation. And it's a privilege and an honor, especially through some of Mount Holyoke's most challenging moments. We've had, gosh, a global pandemic, shifting demographics, 4 presidential transitions at Mount Holyoke, and I've both celebrated and welcomed all of them. Global conflicts, economic ups and downs, and of course, worldwide uncertainty. But I'll tell you, there's no place I'd rather be. Mount Holyoke is an institution of consequence. You all know that, and everybody needs to know that, and it's one that matters, especially right now. We were forged in dissent. Mount Holyoke was forged in dissent, and as long as gender inequities exist, especially as you heard Gail quote me earlier, especially at a moment when women and gender equity are literally under attack, the world needs Mount Holyoke. And I couldn't be just more proud of my affiliation here. And I'm also here because of you, and I stay here because of you. Our alums are one of our greatest assets. You're what I call our superpower. We have a rare combination in our alums of alum loyalty, resilience in engagement and giving, and an unparalleled alum network. In fact, nationally ranked among the best alum networks in the country by Princeton Review, if you don't know that. So today I want to focus a little bit on momentum and good news, say a bit about challenges and where we go from here. And because, of course, my responsibility is fundraising, you won't be surprised when I discuss the importance of resources to everything that we're talking about. So before we get started, has anybody yet had the opportunity to dive into Dr. Beverly Tatum's most recent book? It's called Peril and Promise, College Leadership in Turbulent Times. So you all will recognize that I worked with Beverly Tatum at Spelman. She recruited me there. I worked with her for 8 of my 9 years there. I was quite sad when she left. And when Mount Holyoke called, Beverly was the first person I called to say, should I go? And she said, oh, Kassandra, yes, you should. And by the way, they need you. And I thought, well, I like to be needed. I certainly came for mission, cause, and purpose. I came because of the alums, and I came because I'm ambitious and I wanted to raise a lot of money for an institution of consequence. And that's exactly what we've done and what we will do in the future. You could turn to page, I think it's 319, and see my name in this book. That was the most exciting thing for me. I didn't expect it. It was very gracious of Beverly to recognize those of us that served with her. But I want to read this quote as we go into our discussion. It is in such a time as this that colleges and universities, institutions that encourage us to think critically about important social issues and exercise our capacity for leadership, these institutions become beacons of hope and sources of inspiration. Colleges and universities are communities of problem solvers, communities that attract creative thinkers. They are places where leaders can see the impact of the work they do every day, where effective leadership can be transformational. Despite the challenges, a college campus is a wonderful place to be. And I just want to start off letting you know that Mount Holyoke is a wonderful place to be. So here we go on momentum. So let's celebrate. I would be remiss if I did not start by praising our incredible president. Danielle Holly is the leader that we need at the moment. She's a leader we didn't know that we needed, I think, when the search committee started in 2021. I don't know that we could have predicted just what the next few years would actually demand. How did we know we needed a legal scholar, a Supreme Court expert, a civil rights leader? She is all of that and more. She's compassionate, and she sees the best in us. And by us, I mean Mount Holyoke as an institution of consequence. I mean all of us who work alongside her and who work with her at the institution, and all of our extended community, including our alums. And she brings our excellence forward to the world. If you haven't seen her media presence, please take a look. We have a website called, or a web presence that you can search for called Forged in Dissent, and it's got a good summary of some of her media experiences. And I would say, Danielle, even though some other college presidents, men, are receiving a lot of accolades for being out there early, people like Michael Roth at Wesleyan and so forth, Danielle Holly was out in front on issues related to college campuses and federal actions prior to the election in November. And we started talking about Mount Holyoke as an institution of consequence, and that was forged in dissent before, some of the issues that we're facing now. So I just want you to feel really confident that we have the leader that we need at this time. She listens deeply. And she has stood firm in supporting the enduring relevance of higher education, women's leadership, and gender equity, freedom of speech. I say that with great intention at this moment, freedom of speech and thought, inclusion and belonging, all at a time when there has unprecedented scrutiny. So she's amazing, and I want you to know that. But it's not just the leadership that's strong. Our numbers tell the story. The class of 2029 is the most selective in our history. Applications that are an all-time high. Our student body remains truly global, and we can talk more about some of the challenges there, but it remains truly global. About 20% of our students still come from outside of the US. That international dimension is something we've cultivated for decades. Some of you have played a very active role in doing that. And I would say that it remains strong despite the headwinds that we're facing. Our endowment has a real sense of pride and point of pride. It's now over $1.1 billion. We had a 9.4% return last year. That's incredible and puts us in very rare air as we think about institutions, private institutions in our country. And philanthropy is thriving. And it won't be surprising to you that I want to pause there for a minute because it's really extraordinary. And it's because of our alums. So we've raised the bar since 2016 on almost every metric. We've secured the largest gifts from living alums in our history. I want to say that again, the largest gifts. When I arrived at Mount Holyoke, the largest gift from a living alum in our history was 5 million. And today that number stands at 5 or 6. And so you can, and actually the number is 10. Sorry, let me roll that back. We now have 5 gifts of $10 million each from living alums. So that's what I want to say. In 2016, we had 1 gift at 5 million. We now have 5, it might be 6 gifts at 10 million. That's extraordinary. If we look over the last 5 years, we've had the most productive fundraising timeframe in our history. We've raised about 240 million, raised and received really from all of you. And we're celebrating that as the highest 5-year total in our history. Last year alone, we raised $41 million, about 10 million, not quite. We were just shy. I'm looking at Jane Zimmy. We were just shy of 10 million to support the Mount Holyoke Fund, which of course gives us the flexibility to direct resources to the areas of greatest need and potential every year to the institution. And last year, alums helped us establish the MHC Forward Fund, which was a special fund that gave us flexibility to address emerging issues like legal fees, housing for international students over the summer, and more. And we can certainly talk more about that if you have questions. And while you all know this, peers across the country, including Mount Holyoke, are losing donors year over year. We are holding those strong when we compare to our peers. Our donor retention rate is world class. It's 79% year over year. We retain our donors, and our alum participation stands at 26%, ahead of Wellesley Smith and many of our other peers. So these aren't just statistics; they're really proof that you, Mount Holyoke alums, you keep showing up year after year because this place matters to you and to the world. But this momentum doesn't mean that the road is easy. And so I want to make sure that we spend a little bit of time there. The regulatory and political environment is shifting quickly. If you think about since January of this year, I keep forgetting it's been 8 months, and that's all. It feels like a lifetime. The sands have shifted dramatically for college campuses, and there are some key ways that I want to talk about that with you. One of the most important and frankly disturbing actions that has been taken is the rescission of almost all federal grants at Mount Holyoke. And of course, we're not alone, right? The good news, I guess, in that is that we carried a portfolio of about $4 million a year. And at this moment, we have been able to say to our faculty and students who are engaged in that research that we will backfill to the best of our ability your research priorities. We're able to do that because of the generosity of having reserve funds. We won't be able to sustain that in the future, and to the extent that we need to in the future, by relying on external sources. We are going to have to start to support campus-based research as alums of our institutions, and that is just a fact. And it's really interesting because just last year we were named as a top undergraduate research institution by Carnegie. So that recognition is prestigious, it's deserved, but it also raises the stakes. And so to maintain it, we're going to have to find new funding sources. We also know that earlier, and it's not over yet, but earlier this year in the budget reconciliation process, there was a proposal that would have perhaps had Mount Holyoke paying up to 21% of a tax on our endowment earnings. That would have been devastating to Mount Holyoke. And fortunately, because we have great partners, we're part of a small college coalition being supported by the American Council on Education, where we've been able to really get into Congress and talk with representatives, particularly representatives in red states, who aren't as familiar with the incredible resources that are offered to students in their states by our colleges and by private colleges and universities. And so we undertook a partnership with, Smith and Amherst and Haverford and all of the colleges that you would want to see in that group. And I'm pleased to say that I believe we made a difference in educating our Congress and those who may not yet have understood our impact in a positive way. And there, as it turns out, in the bill that is in place now, Mount Holyoke actually avoids the endowment tax altogether because there is a cap on a threshold on student enrollment of 5,000. So as long as we are under 5,000, then we are not subject to the excise tax on our endowment. Just for a point of reference, I think in one of the years that we were subject to that tax, we paid about 400,000. This could have brought that up to 8 million for Mount Holyoke. That would have been devastating. So, and as if you're all looking at the trends and in the news, you know that these are conversations that are settled for one moment and then resurrected the next. I can tell you that the state of Massachusetts, there is a bill that's been introduced around excise tax on college endowments. It's not new; it's been introduced other years, but also a mandatory payment in lieu of taxes to local communities as part of that proposed bill. So our leadership at Mount Holyoke, so Danielle Holly, I imagine, I don't imagine, we are planning to match up with our 5 college presidential colleagues and go to the state capitol and talk to our legislature about what a bad idea all of that is. Um, I should say that on the faculty research grant side, we do have a new grants person. Her name is Lisa Stouffer. She has a lot of experience, both in 5 colleges and otherwise, and I think is the right person to help us navigate this next era of federal funding and also private. Large private foundations. So I don't know if you saw the news today, but the Open Society Foundation is under some sort of official investigation. Ford has been targeted. These are all foundations that are really important to higher education in the United States and to the liberal arts in particular. So I need to name that. Moving to demographics, if some of you have heard about the demographic cliff, it is here. In 2025, in the United States, that was the largest number of high school graduates, college-bound high school graduates that are predicted to be in the pool for quite some time to come. So we have a smaller pool. My generation had fewer children, and we have and so there are fewer students who are headed to college. That means there's more competition. That means that families continue to and are doubling down on some hard questions about the return on investment of an education like Mount Holyoke. Our students, and some of you know this in your own families, I certainly talk with my daughters about this regularly. Students are graduating into an economy where they may or may not achieve the same stability that their parents had. And whether or not the reality is there, the perception right now of economic uncertainty is really important as we think about families and we think about fundraising. This is a heavy reality, and it's something that is on the minds of our students and all of us at Mount Holyoke. And then costs keep climbing. We have been investing in reducing our reliance on adjunct faculty, and we're doing that by rebuilding tenure track faculty lines. We are sustaining a $90 million a year financial aid program. That's huge. That's about what Smith also awards or has in the past, and their endowment is more than 3 times our endowment. We took on the necessary but unfunded decision to bring faculty and staff salaries to align better with peer institutions. And of course, we have to maintain a historic campus. We know that that campus defines the MHC experience for many. And let me tell you, there are some areas that are untouched by time. Do not worry, they look exactly the way they did when you when you left campus in 1974. And while that may be charming to us, it is not a competitive advantage when we think about particularly enrollment. So here's the good news. We're prepared. How are we prepared? I hope you all saw the wonderful announcement last week of the Mount Holyoke commitment. If you didn't, I will just summarize. It guarantees that U.S. families that earn $150,000 or less annually will not pay tuition at Mount Holyoke. That is amazing. And we ought to really celebrate that. It's a powerful message to families who might otherwise hesitate to even consider Mount Holyoke. And I will say that that initiative is made possible by two things. One, gifts that donors have made over time to support scholarship and financial aid, including our Meet the Moment effort during the pandemic, which brought over 40 million, I think 42.8 or $43 million into the endowment in a period of 18 months. That was historic, unprecedented for Mount Holyoke, and it made all the difference. And then the incredible stewardship of that endowment by our all alum, all women investment committee, guided and advised by Anna Yankova, who is class of 1997, Mount Holyoke, and who was an international student at Mount Holyoke from Bulgaria. And so we are really proud of that, and it's a really important commitment that we can make to families, and it is very important for enrollment and admissions. We've hired 31 new tenure track faculty in the last 3 years, and we have 9 more searches underway now. That's a significant investment in our academic core. And I can say that funding for that, and not only for the positions, but for research, startup costs, and facilities is going to be really important. When we bring those faculty on, we make a 30 to 40-year commitment to them, and they commit to us to deliver on our mission and the academic core of excellence that is so important to us. And so we have to support them. And by doing so, we are reducing what had become an over-reliance on adjunct faculty. And I know that that's a concern that some of you have had. And importantly, we've also launched a campus renewal initiative. And this initiative is identifying the top needs and opportunities on our physical campus. It's a process we haven't really taken on in about 20 years. And many of you had the opportunity to participate as we were asking for your feedback earlier in the year. If you're on the gates, you can go and watch videos that outline the process. And our next significant decision point will be in November, when the Board of Trustees will receive the college leadership's recommendations on a 15-year capital plan. I want to just tell a quick story. So back in 2016 and prior to that, we were facing a dining challenge. And I am taking a personal risk by even talking about this, knowing that there were many alums who felt very strongly, and I understand, about dining in our residence halls. But the reality is, and I'm going to always tell you the truth, the reality is our residence hall spaces weren't meeting the demand. People were concerned about food waste and environmental impact, and students were literally voting with their feet. They were overwhelming the grab and go in that very small area in Blanchard. And so we listened, we reimagined, and yes, there was consternation along the way. And imagine me walking into that in my first couple months at Mount Holyoke. I was both energized and surprised because it showed me that Mount Holyoke alums care. And that's most important. I'd rather have Mount Holyoke alums who care than those who are apathetic about us. And so we refined that vision. We raised the money. We had a significant challenge grant from an alum, one of those now 10 million, actually more than $10 million donors. We built an incredible dining commons. We reduced waste. We are among the top local food sourcing units in Western Massachusetts. And a week and a half ago, we were named in the top 5% of college dining programs in the country by Princeton Review. So why am I telling you this? It matters because it shows what we can do. We faced challenges, we came together, we built something contemporary, and now it's a point of pride and excellence, and it's impacting not only the student experience, but our competitive enrollment position. So today, our challenge really is the broader campus: accessibility, outdated residence halls, aging academic spaces like Clapp, Williston, and Rook. Again, they may look nostalgic to us, but to prospective students and families, they signal whether Mount Holyoke is ready for the future. So like dining, this is another opportunity. And with vision and resources, we will transform these spaces into places that attract and serve 21st century students and faculty and staff. So that brings me back to vision. Some of you have heard me say vision without resources is hallucination. I'll say it again. Vision without resources is hallucination. And so it's our job together, my job literally, but our job together to ensure that our vision is realized. So that's why we will not launch publicly in 2026 a comprehensive fundraising campaign. It's the first comprehensive campaign since the last one ended in 2013. That campaign raised over $300 million. I will get in. I will tell you what we're hoping to support with that campaign in a moment. But I know your first question is, how big will our campaign be? The truth is, I don't know yet. But let me tell you, Smith in its last campaign reported, I'm not competitive at all, but Smith reported 486 million raised in its last campaign. Wellesley reported 514 million in its last campaign. So you can bet your bottom dollar is going to be bigger than those. And it will be a significant campaign. Whether at the time that we announce it, it's the largest in women's college history, I don't know. I can't predict. But what I can tell you is it will be the largest in Mount Holyoke's history, and it will be the size, and it will be a consequential campaign that matches our ambitions and what we know is important for Mount Holyoke. So we'll be looking for more support, as I've touched on, in faculty excellence and research. We need a new home for the life sciences. Clapp is 100 years old, and it is charming, but it is not serving our current students and faculty, and we know that. We need startup packages for these 40 faculty who will have joined us by the launch, and we need sustained support for faculty research and development. Student success and career outcomes. One thing that alums tell us is that they want to engage with our students around career success. We know the data shows us that we are lagging a little bit behind in terms of job in hand compared to some of our all gender peers. And the women's colleges lag against co-ed peers, we lag a little bit against our women's college peers. So Danielle Holly has made that a focus of our work, and we've seen a lot of progress even in the last 18 months. Campus renewal, we've talked about, and then financial aid, of course. So we need to deliver on what's most important: extraordinary teaching and research, transformative student experiences, and a campus that supports both, and access to everyone who belongs here. So I have four ways that I want to talk about your role in our success, and then I'm going to stop and we're going to do whatever you do in terms of Q&A. So first, and this may seem a little odd, but I want to ask this of you and all Mount Holyoke alums. Can we please give each other grace during these difficult moments? Change is hard, and there is a lot of change going on. And there is a lot to be concerned about right now. And I feel it. I find myself resentful sometimes that things move faster than I can keep up. I feel this way about artificial intelligence, and we can talk a little bit about AI and Mount Holyoke's approach if you'd like. And it is extraordinarily difficult to lead on a college campus these days. I can say with confidence that the last 5 years have been among the most difficult in my almost 35 of hanging out on college campuses. Our students and faculty and staff and leadership are worried about democracy. We're worried about women's rights and gender equity. We're worried about freedom of speech. We're worried about racial equity and marginalization. We're worried about freedom of the press. We're worried about faculty autonomy, right? Lots to be concerned about. They are not only worried about these things for themselves, right, and their families, but also for Mount Holyoke. And they show up every day with Mount Holyoke at the heart of their efforts. So my hope is that we can approach our relationships on and off campus with curiosity And remember that we're all here for the same reason, and that's because we love Mount Holyoke and we all want to play a role in preserving its future. So this sort of give and get around grace is really important, and how we interact with each other is increasingly something that I'm thinking about on behalf of all of us. Number two, easier to do maybe. Tell the story, share the good news. When you talk about record applications, when you talk about our global student body, when you talk about our dining commons being ranked in the top 5%, you're amplifying Mount Holyoke's strength. And we need you to do that. You are the living embodiment of the college, and you are our ambassadors. And in fact, you're our best ambassadors. You and our students, our alums and students are our best ambassadors. Model giving. Need I say more? Model giving. I was just on another call where I was talking about we were talking about the green purse, that emerald green purse. So let's get our emerald green purses or our messenger bags or our Apple Pay opportunities, and let's gather the dollars that are needed for Mount Holyoke. Renew your gift, increase your gift, share why you give, your story, why you care, why you contribute, and thanking others who join you is far more compelling, frankly, than any statistic that I can cite. And then I want to ask you to open doors. Don't assume that we know everyone. Don't assume that we have uncovered every stone, because we know we have not. Introduce 2 or 3 new people to Mount Holyoke. They can be alums. They don't have to be alums. It could be a prospective student, potential donor, a fellow alum, but that's how our network grows. And finally, I would say, just as you heard me do this morning, whenever you have the opportunity, tell people you went to Mount Holyoke. I told you I went to the Lincoln School and Simmons College, not only as a way to connect with you as fellow women's college grads, but to support the places that I care about deeply in the work, and to give them the credit for much of the foundation of my success and the work I do for Mount Holyoke. So that's what I had to say. I am sure that you have questions, but one thing I want to leave you with is another quote from Beverly's book, and she's talking about who is the next student ready to break down barriers and change the course of history. Of course, she's saying that they could come from our colleges and universities. As a nation, we cannot afford to let the next generation's talent and leadership go undeveloped. A college education is undoubtedly a private benefit to the recipient, but it is also immeasurably a public good. We need public policy to help address the problem of educational access and affordability. In the meantime, for those of us who have already benefited from the generosity of others, our obligation should be clear. Pay it forward. The future we save may truly be our own. So thank you for inviting me and letting me speak with you. And I am ready for conversation and questions.
Sounds great. What we typically will do is that people will raise their hands and we will call on them and they will ask your question. We remind you that when you put your hand up, would you please leave your hand up until your question is answered? Because that way Cassandra can see you. I guess I want to start with a question first, and it kind of makes you put your feet back into that marketing communication realm that you were in before, and still are to a certain extent, even when you're talking to us tonight. Most of us grew up where we had a local newspaper, a national newspaper. We had 3 TV stations, and now we have an unlimited number of stations. Mount Holyoke has a number of different platforms that they use to communicate with us. There are Substacks and this and that. How does Mount Holyoke come up with a model for communicating with us so that we don't tune out? That is a fear that I have, that we're going to tune out.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. And it's something we think about often. In fact, I was just talking with someone earlier today. I asked for some data on how many emails we're sending or plan to send this fall, and what we anticipate open rates and so forth would be. So there is a science to it, Gail, right? And those of you who've been in marketing know that, and we are working on that. I would say that the way that we have tried to mitigate some of this is really by relying on those platforms that give us either the most immediate opportunity or the most thorough opportunities. So I would remit to you that the best places for you to understand what's happening at Mount Holyoke remain the Alum Magazine. And we know from data that that is the most read publication on Mount Holyoke's campus. And it is the way that many, particularly our more senior alums, receive information. Our more recent graduates enjoy it, but it is not the primary way that they're receiving information. They're receiving information word of mouth and social media. So it won't surprise you that the other place that we have invested in, and I feel proud of this because when I came into the marketing team as its leader, we had 0 positions focused on social media. 0. That was 5 years ago, y'all. Social media was a thing back then. Right. So we've really invested in that area. And I know that that can be challenging sometimes for those who are not as ingrained in social, but is absolutely the fastest way that we can get to the most people. I would say the Laurel Chain. If you want to know what's happening at Mount Holyoke, read the Laurel Chain. If you read nothing else that comes from Mount Holyoke, read the Laurel Chain, please. It was once a month. We heard in our surveying that actually alums wanted fewer emails throughout the month, but they wanted another issue so that they could be assured that it wouldn't be a whole month before they got the curated content. So we now do it twice a month when we're not on hiatus. Please read that. Encourage your classmates to read that. That's super, super important. The other thing that I would just say is that there are lots of platforms out there that Mount Holyoke is not participating in as an institution. So Facebook groups, right? Alum-led Facebook groups. By design and on purpose, we don't monitor those. Those are enabled and monitored by volunteers. We actually want to keep it that way. That is your space. And when all of you hear something or see something on those platforms that you say, well, that's not quite my experience, or that's not what I heard, or gosh, I feel like Kassandra might have said something a little different when we saw her earlier this week. I encourage you to share what you know and or reach out to confirm or get the facts. I want to give just a shout out. I know Jane Zimmy is popular and known in your class, but Jane and I had an opportunity to work in this way about a year and a half ago, where we were really partners in progress around thinking about really important issues and monitoring social. And Jane would ask me questions, and I would ask her questions, and it was both amazing and incredibly helpful. We need your eyes and ears, and we need to hear from you. So if something is going on in those platforms, please let us know. The other thing I need to say to you is that the website is a good source of information, and the website is not for us. The website is for prospective students and families. That is the way that they get information and that they're able to see whether or not Mount Holyoke is the right fit for them. So while we do have presence for alums and faculty and staff and others, the primary audience, and any collegiate leader would tell you this, the primary audience, front-facing audience of our website are prospective students. And so you might see things that don't resonate or resonate differently for alums, but that's because we are studying the data, and we know that that the biggest investment that we can make in getting Mount Holyoke, the name of Mount Holyoke, and also our incredible distinctions out into the world is through our website for prospective students.
Great.
And then the last thing I'm going to say is lots of people are ignoring social media at the moment and other headlines. And so we shouldn't assume, as we're talking with our alums and others, that they are well versed in some of the issues that we're talking about. I spoke with a donor the other day who didn't know about the endowment tax and that fight. So I just want to also say that people are opting in and out for their own capacity and health and well-being, and I get that. And so we also should just be mindful that not everybody is as closely attuned to the issues as we are.
Great. Thank you for that answer. Very thorough. Other questions, please raise your hand and we'd love to call on you. Don't be shy.
I know this class is not shy. I'm not worried about that.
Oh, come on, ladies. Okay. Oh, Nan, I'm saying, who is class of 74? Okay.
Yeah, I forgot to renew my name today. Oh, well. I'm curious, you mentioned the excise tax. Are there any other current ongoing legal attacks and I say legal attacks in the most wide-ranging way.
Yeah.
I understand that the college has put aside a considerable amount of money to fight whatever attacks will come our way. But is there anything going on now that
Yeah.
we're allowed to know about and we might
Yeah.
not know about?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit about that. And I want to say we've put aside as much as we can to prepare, but it will likely not be enough. If you think about, so the things that are on the radar in on the federal front right now, immigration and visas. So the newest not it's not legislation, it's not law. The newest actions that are being promoted uh, will make it more difficult for new visas for students who want to study in the US to receive them overseas. So right now, our students, we didn't lose students as a result of the visa issues. All of the students who had intended to come to Mount Holyoke were able to come. That's pretty great. But what we know is that it will be harder for them to get visas going forward, and it will be harder for them to stay post-graduation for that time that is typical when you come to the US from overseas. I think what I'm even more worried about, frankly, than the actual actions or legislation is perception. If I am a parent or a family that is thinking about sending their child out of the country for college, is the US the place anymore that I think is the best for that student? And I don't know that all families will answer that question the same way going forward as they have in the past. So, regardless of any action, perception matters a lot, and we're doing all that we can to help folks understand that Mount Holyoke itself is an incredible community of belonging. Massachusetts is a great state to be in if you want to come to study and as an international student, et cetera, et cetera. But it is an added layer, Nan, that I think we all want to pay attention. We have to pay attention to. Another piece, and this is just an example, and I think this is a current example. There may be more. We were named, and this is public information. I'm not telling you anything that is not. We were named in a lawsuit that is targeting an organization, a former organization known as COFE. So that is COFHE. Please help me if I get this wrong. The Council on Financing of Higher Education. It is a organization that was formed, I think, 40 years ago, maybe, longstanding organization of the most selective colleges in the U.S. That meet one of the criteria that you have to meet. Demonstrated financial need for students and family. And that has all of the places you might imagine, MIT and Princeton and Mount Holyoke and so forth. Over time, there have been claims that from the Department of Justice that organizations like that actually are subject to antitrust laws. And what has happened most recently is there is a plaintiffs organization that has identified a couple of students to serve as plaintiffs to put forward the notion that this group, by membership in this group, these colleges and universities were engaging in price fixing because of practices around early decision. So early decision, right, is when you say, if you'll have me, I will definitely come, right? What might be lost in that is I can definitely come if my family can afford it. Right. And so there is always an opportunity for families and students to evaluate financial aid as part of that final decision. This lawsuit, which I hope will be dismissed, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know, but we certainly have representation, good representation. In these kinds of cases, the colleges sort of branch off and get into groups. So I think our group is Smith and Haverford for this initial hearing in November. My hope is it'll be dismissed, but the truth is we're spending time, energy, mental capacity, sleepless nights, right? All of that, and money. Yeah, Nan, on these kinds of things. This is the first this year. It will not be the last. And that's just an example of the kinds of actions that are being levied against institutions like Mount Holyoke.
Thank you for that.
So,
Pat,
yeah.
Hi, yeah, I was really glad to hear that Mount Holyoke has made a commitment to U.S. families for below a certain uh, um, amount of money for tuition. And I wondered what you mean by tuition. Do you mean tuition, room and board? I mean, how
Correct.
much does somebody have to pay?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my disclaimer on this is that every situation is different. So if I'm quoting numbers and so forth, we can't apply them to every individual family. But here's what I can say. So the total cost of attendance at Mount Holyoke is about $90,000 a year.
Well, okay.
So let's just let that sit for a moment, right? The biggest part of our budget is the academic core and faculty salaries, right? So we can have a whole conversation about why the number is that high, but that the number is that high, and that is certainly in line with peers, and in fact less than some of our peers. I think Wellesley just hit over $100,000, and we will be there at some point. We generally divide the cost of attendance into kind of a couple of categories. So one is um, food and housing is how they refer to it now, not room and board. That's just to simplify language,
Okay.
right? It's like room and board. What the heck is that? Housing and food, right? That's one bucket. The other is tuition and fees, right? So you can think about, the student government collects a $300 fee from every student for student programming, right? Those kinds of things, tuition and fees. And then there's a calculation that is standard around what it actually costs to attend. So books, if you're coming from from far away, what does it cost you to get to Mount Holyoke? Some reasonable amount of personal expenses. What we have done, both with this commitment and again, because of our incredible endowment, stewardship, and the gifts that alums have given, we've made a commitment that we are trying to cap any loan burden for any student at $19,000 for their career at Mount Holyoke. So that is a very expensive but really important commitment that we've made. The national average is, I think, about 35,000. It could be up to 40 in terms of loan indebtedness for an average undergraduate. So to think about Mount Holyoke committing to being half of that or less is huge. And so families who have the most need, so Pell eligible students and so forth, will not be asked to take loans. But on average, a student from Mount Holyoke graduates with under $20,000 in student loan debt, and that's not even the price of a car anymore, right? It's an amazing actually investment that we've made.
No, it is an amazing investment. I was wondering if, for instance, the argument was we pay the tuition, and so essentially you can go to Mount Holyoke for the cost of going to your local state institution, but it sounds like it's a much better deal than that.
It's
So
actually
thanks for
better than
sharing that
that.
information.
Yeah, no, Pat, thank you. It's better than that. And let me say this, when we were lobbying or educating, I'd like to let me call it educating our Congress members, particularly those in red states that have a lot of familiarity with state schools, but less, frankly, with the advantages of private particularly private liberal arts colleges. We were able to tell them that actually their state benefits from students who come to Massachusetts. It costs their state less for a student from their state to go to Mount Holyoke than it would if they stayed in state. And so in many ways, we are actually helping those states educate their population by supporting students coming to Mount Holyoke. So Pat, you've picked up on a really important point that, and even for it, and our biggest competitors in terms of local students or in terms of state institutions are UMass and UConn. And for certain families, it will actually cost them less, even if they live in state, to come to Mount Holyoke than it would for them to go to a state institution.
Well, I know in California, there's been this desire to get a lot of out-of-state students because they have to pay full freight. And so it's gotten a lot more difficult for local, or the perception is that
Yeah.
it's a lot more
Yeah.
difficult for local kids to get into the
To get
UC
in.
system. So I
Yeah.
would think that would be something to advertise out here.
Yeah, I think that's right. I also think that a really important opportunity that we have is not just getting students from out of state, but remember, in today's world, most students want to go within 3 hours of where their families live, and we know that that demographic cliff is particularly hitting states like Massachusetts and New England. Lots of population growth in places like Texas, which actually is the largest feeder state outside of New England for our incoming class. I don't know if that has anything to do with Danielle Holly coming from Texas, but let's just, pretend perhaps it is. So this notion that we can both attract, a larger pool of students, but they're all going to want to go to school within 3 hours of where their families is quite a puzzle piece to figure out. So Pat, your point is really important.
We have time for one or two more questions. So do I have questions from anybody else, please? Bonnie, I see your hand is up. Your real hand is up. Okay, and you need, yeah, there you go. Thanks.
Hi. Can you help me understand something? When we all donate, there's always a segment on the card that says, would you like your money to go toward a particular department or a particular function? It's always really curious to me how, like this class gives this amount of money, or all the alums give an amount of money. Who makes the decision as to what percentage goes where, and how does that get ranked? So is it a science department that gets ranked higher? Who decides whether this is the year that the athletic department gets ranked higher? I mean, we willingly give the money, and I'm perfectly happy for someone to make that decision, but I'm always so curious as to how that decision is made. Is it made on a particular institution's fancy, or on what yields the most? We used to think in the arts department that we were on the bottom of the totem pole because we were not producers of money. So
which department did you say I missed?
The arts department.
The arts department. Okay.
Department, because we weren't going to be the ones who turned out to be bankers, and we weren't going to be the ones to be scientists. That give them less money because they're not going to yield as much in the old bank.
Well, that perception, we're going to correct that right here. Jane, you want me to take this one first, and you want to add in, or do you want to explain it? Jane, you're on mute. Jane's going to stay on mute, apparently.
Yeah. Kassandra, go ahead. Answer that.
I'm going to go ahead. So, Bonnie, it's a great question. And I'm going to talk about it in two ways. So different than a large university where there are each department or each division, or each college or school is what's called a tub on its own bottom, meaning it has its own revenue and resources from outside go to support, and there's an expectation that they will raise a certain amount of money. Small private liberal arts colleges don't work that way, and it's for exactly the reason, Bonnie, that you have just identified, that there would be the haves and have-nots, right? In the context of our academic program. And we believe at Mount Holyoke and other similarly situated institutions that I've worked at, that the entire curriculum deserves to be supported, and you don't have one without the other. So a liberal arts education is not a liberal arts education without the arts. So here's how it actually works. Mount Holyoke, I'm going to use a round number just because it's easy. Our budget is higher than this now. I think it's like 185. But let's imagine that our annual operating budget for the college, net scholarship aid, right? So let's say $150 million is what we spend, not including scholarship and financial aid. Okay. That the number's more like 180 or 185 now, but 150 is I can do the math better there. On an annual basis, we put in all of our expenses. We see what what we project the endowment to earn and all of that. And at the end of the day, there is a gap every year, and it is usually around 6% of the operating budget. So there is 6% of that operating budget is missing, right? Every year. And that's where your gifts come in, right? And so if we're thinking about the Mount Holyoke Fund in particular, and that is the way that most alums will participate in giving, is through the Mount Holyoke Fund. So we know what we need to do to fill that gap. We promote the Mount Holyoke Fund. And within the Mount Holyoke Fund, we want you to be able to tell us what you care about, right? And we want you to be able to support the arts at Mount Holyoke. And so what that does is it creates a destination within the Mount Holyoke Fund that is supportive of the arts. In any given year, based on the budget, that those dollars that are supporting the arts might go to a capital renovation in Rook, or it might go to my favorite play last year was The Addams Family. It was so good in theater. It could go to support a student art project, right? So in any given year, the areas of greatest need and potential are identified by the faculty in the case of the academic core through the provost and her office, and that gets brought to the attention of the budget or is brought to the top of the budget process, and then we are charged with filling those holes. When you designate your gift in the Mount Holyoke Fund, Bonnie, I'm making this up, to the arts or to that destination, in most years, the art department has already asked for and received sort of what they have anticipated that they needed above and beyond last year's budget, and we are funding that through the gifts to the annual fund. I hope that's helpful. I want to say one other, I don't want to get into mixed metaphors, but another way that I think about it from the donor perspective is we are on a highway, right? We are on a giving highway, and we're all headed towards the same direction, which is supporting Mount Holyoke. And some of us get onto that highway through our class giving. Right. And nobody knows that better than Jane Zimmy, class 74. We get in with our class giving. Others of us get onto that highway because we care about scholarships and financial aid. And so that's really what we care about. So we're going to get onto that highway. There are lots of lanes in this highway, right? And Bonnie, we may cross lanes and switch lanes. I am a major donor to Mount Holyoke. I don't feel embarrassed saying that. I have a significant contribution, and I'm thinking about what I will do next as part of this campaign. I am in many lanes on that highway. I make gifts to the endowment. I make gifts to our student safety net fund. I make gifts in support of the senior class. I match gifts for faculty and staff who give to Mount Holyoke, right? So I'm in a lot of those lanes, and I cross over. And some years I'm heavier in the high speed lane when I know that there's an urgent need. And maybe some years I'm in the kind of steadier lane because, you know, I got tax considerations, right? So we're all headed in the same direction. How you get onto the highway and in which lanes you fit and you travel in is entirely really up to you as a donor. And we're trying to provide as many on-ramps as we can and remove as many barriers for giving. So at the end of the day, at the bottom line is to your question, the leadership team, through a robust budgeting process that is bottom up, determines what the needs are. And then we as fundraisers are looking to fill that gap. It's usually about 6% of the operating budget every year through the Mount Holyoke Fund.
Awesome. Thank you. Mary Lee, you may ask your question. We only have time for one more question and 2 more minutes.
I apologize for no video. I have a new computer. Anyway, when I usually donate, I usually just say use it where it's best, where it's most needed. Is that valuable?
Absolutely. So I can say to this group, flexibility and nimbleness are what's important. I mean, it's all very important. $1 for Mount Holyoke, $1 for the museum, or $1 for scholarships, or $1 for the endowment is $1 for Mount Holyoke. So I want to be clear that all gifts, size, impact, all of that are welcome. Um, Flexible, lightly restricted gifts are very helpful, and it's for the reasons that I was outlining earlier. Every year there are areas of need and potential that we may or may not anticipate, and so your willingness to give us the flexibility, as the board of trustees, a leadership team, the faculty, and so forth, to apply your gifts to those areas is really important. I will say that on an annual basis, our largest non-salary expense and non-infrastructure expense is financial aid and scholarship. So the extent to which folks are supporting that allows us then to free up other dollars we might have had to put toward scholarship and financial aid to do the things that donors might find a little less sexy. Can I say that? Maybe a little less invigorating in terms of philanthropy. Like, we used to talk about turning on lights and buying toilet paper. We don't really talk like that anymore, but the opportunity that you give us by entrusting us with your flexible funding allows us to capitalize on areas where other donors might not support, or emerging areas. For example, students who are doing research. We don't always have funding for them to go to conferences. When we have flexible funding, we're able to say, hey, listen, that student really hit it out of the park. We're going to send them to a conference to present their paper. Just one small example.
Thank you.
Do you have an operating endowment?
I didn't hear.
I did
Do
not
you have an operating endowment?
operating.
Oh, that support the operating budget? Yes, we sure do. What we don't have are operating endowments that support renewal on our buildings. And that is, as we go through this campus renewal process, we need to not only think about what we need to do for the buildings now, but how we're going to not end up in the position of hundreds of millions of dollars in deferred maintenance in the future. And some of that is about creating not only the renovations for today, but endowments that will support campus renewal in the future.
Thank you.
Well, I have to wrap this up by saying that my good friend here in town, Denise Pappas, is a trustee emerita from Simmons College. And
Did we talk about Denise Pappas when we met, Gail?
so, but Denise is a dear
Oh.
friend, and she said, you guys are so lucky at Mount Holyoke to have Kassandra Jolley working there now. And so on behalf of the class, I say, I think we're very lucky. And thank you for taking the time to come and speak to us tonight.
It's my pleasure. I hope you'll have me back. And Gail, will you please give Denise my best?
I will.
It's a name I haven't heard in a long time, and I think of her very fondly. And please give her my best.
I will. Thank you very much. And thank you for.
Okay. Have fun, Zoomtails. I'll see you again.
Thank you. Nan, back to you.
Back to me. Okay, ladies. That was interesting. I hope that you got the questions answered that you wanted. And if you didn't, by all means, you can find her email. She'll answer you. Okay, so in the meantime, we've missed one another all summer. There are 26 of us that still remain. We're going to go to a breakout. Just looking at my watch. Oh my goodness. Okay, it's 21 after 8, so we'll just do one breakout.
Because we're really this year trying very hard to make sure we are done and out by 8.
We're trying. So if anybody is not going to stay for the breakout, go ahead and leave us now so that I can do our breakout rooms.
But otherwise, stay.
But otherwise, please stay.
10 minutes. That's all.
Okay. So let me do our breakout rooms, and I will do this. Okay, I will see you all in the breakout rooms.
Hi, Irene. I have to go back out for a minute. Wait a second.